So salam all, salam to the people of Gaza, salam to the people deserving of peace. Thank you all for joining us on this remarkable night. And it's very unfortunate that this is how we're joining, basically. Please join us to recognize authors and translators and their contributions to the literature on the subject of Palestine and its resistance to occupation and apartheid. This is the 12th running Palestine Book Awards. As you may be aware, it was postponed to the atrocities unfolding in Gaza. The PBA and the shortlisted authors both decided, and it wasn't appropriate to celebrate the Palestine while the people of Palestine and Gaza face genocide. So after months of deliberation, MEMO's stance remains the same, and the PBA team and judges agree. The decision was to host tonight's virtual event in order to announce the winners and further shed the light on Gaza. We will be joined tonight by the Palestinian poet Mosab Abu Toha. He's also a survivor of the ongoing war and genocide in Gaza. And he's a winner of the 2022 Palestine Book Awards Creative Award. And the event will be moderated by Professor Eugene. And I leave the floor to you, Professor Eugene.
Aisha, thank you so much. And it is a sad honor to be with everyone tonight in a Palestine Book Award happening as a webinar instead of in the P21 gallery as we normally have it, where we all come together with the authors and the readers in a sense of celebration. But of course, these aren't times for celebrations. And when the event was meant to be held on the 2nd of November, we all recognized that it was not a moment for us to come together and be talking about celebrating culture in the way that provides a sense of solidarity and of steadfastness in the Palestinian cause, that our eyes all turn to Gaza, to the suffering of its people, for a war that we had no idea would go on as long as indeed it has done. And that wonderful sense of walking into the gallery, as you pass the table on which all of the books are laid out and see the readers buying the books very quickly, and you go through the hall with all the chairs laid out, rapidly filled by the excited crowd, a crowd that comes together every year for this event, loves this event, loves reading about Palestine and seeing how Palestine is remembered and created by the creative writers, the poets, the novelists, those who write their memoirs, by the scholars who write the books. These books all taken together representing a kind of national library of Palestine that is constantly in the making, constantly being built and rebuilt as Palestine is spoken, remembered, loved, and written about. But as we recognize that it was not a moment for celebration, so we believe so fundamentally in the mission of us coming together to celebrate the role of books in preserving the memory and the study and the love and appreciation of Palestine, that no war has ever stopped. This war will certainly not stop. But it changes the tone of our meeting today. It changes my tone. I speak to you with a broad American accent. And as I think about the role that American taxpayer money contributes to paying for the very bombs, often as large as 2,000 pounds, that are being used to destroy Gaza night after night after night. The sense of collective responsibility that we bear for what our government does makes me feel heartbroken to be speaking to you in my American accent as we remember Palestine and we remember Gaza and the steadfastness that binds its people to the land against the harshest torments and the most violent war. I say that with recognition of the suffering of Israelis from the 7th of October, and I understand their mourning and their grief, as I would against attacks against civilians anywhere. But after more than 100 days of this war, with a known casualty rate 20 times greater among Palestinians than what Israelis have suffered on the 7th of October. And that with 10,000 people unaccounted for and believed to be lying in the rubble of the destroyed buildings of Gaza. This is not to count the tens of thousands of wounded, the thousands who've lost limbs and their vision and other life-changing injuries as a result of this relentless war, of the calls for an immediate ceasefire and the provision of the needs for the people of Gaza to live, going unheeded day after day after day. The sense of mourning that binds us all together tonight would be overwhelming if we could not speak out of solidarity with Gaza, out of our wish to share in the courage that holds them together against such adversity, our wish to remember their courage and to see in their endurance hope that when this war ends, that Palestine will still stand, that we will meet again to celebrate Palestinian letters in more of a sense of celebration. For tonight, steadfastness requires us to read out the names of those whose books have been shortlisted for the creative and inventive ways that they preserve Palestine imprint. We'll have a word from each of our authors, who will be able to take that opportunity to make their own reflections on where we stand after 103 days of this horrific war. And then I will hand over to my dear friend, Dr. Nur Masalha, who will have the privilege of sharing with you whom from among those shortlisted authors have been honored this year with the Palestine Book Award. But I'd like now first to invite our esteemed friend and colleague, poet and publisher, if I could call on Mosab Abu Toha to share with us his reflections before we proceed to discussing the shortlist. Mosab, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Eugene. Many thanks to the Palestine Book Award team for holding this event during this terrible time. I mean, I'm not a publisher, I'm a librarian, not by profession, but by luck. So these are the words that I want to share with you as someone who survived the horrendous Israeli attacks in Gaza. I spent about 60 days in Gaza, during which I was kidnapped by the Israeli army. And then I was able to leave Gaza with my wife and 3 children. Palestine is a story away. The late Dr. Rifat al-Arair would always tell me. Palestine is a poem away, I would respond. And to you all, I say, humanity and freedom are a breath away. The only thing we need to do is to breathe well. It's been 108 days since Israel started to bomb Gaza nonstop. They have killed over 30,000 Gazans, more than half of whom are children. They have blown up schools and posted videos of themselves doing so. They have bombed hospitals and clinics. Now, while I'm addressing you, there are only 6 ambulances working in North Gaza, an area separated from the south by the Israeli tanks and snipers. And where more than 500,000 Gazans still live. If you think about this carefully, you learn that for every 100,000 Gazans, there is only 1 ambulance. Will this be for a bleeding child, for a pregnant mother, for an ailing grandparent? But can they be saved? Unfortunately, no. Even if some members of a bombed family survive, there is no mobile phone service in Gaza. Israel was cruel enough to shut down everything. Not only water and electricity, but also communication services. The only way people in Gaza can communicate through is by using an eSIM card with foreign connections. Gazans finally broke the siege. Many of my friends worldwide were begging me to leave the northern part of Gaza and head south. I kept asking them whether I would make it alive there. They said there is no guarantee. I asked whether Israel is not planning to cram people in the south of Gaza so it would become easier for them, for their warplanes and artillery shells to kill more people. They had no idea. As of this time, more than 1 million people are crowded upon each other in tents in Rafah, South Gaza. Does this mean there is no bombing there? No. Just a few hours ago, Israel bombed a house in East Rafah, killing 16 people, half of whom were children. And this is what has been happening for weeks and weeks. The Israeli army even bombed a tent in Khan Yunis last week, killing a few people from the Habib family. A few days after my friend Ismail Abu Ghaben left the northern part of Gaza for the south, the house in the Nusayrat camp where he stayed with his wife and their two kids, his parents and his sisters, got bombed. Only Ismail's wife and two of his sisters survived. Ismail taught the Arabic language at an UNRWA school. His father, also killed in that attack, was an education specialist at UNRWA. Talking about UNRWA, yesterday we heard that the UNRWA Commissioner General was denied permit to enter the northern part of Gaza. Ismail and his family are not rare cases. There are hundreds of similar examples. In Gaza, we are not numbers. We are not examples. Nasim Abu Shidq was born deaf and mute. On December the 9th, Nasim, along with other young people, were taken by the Israeli army, blindfolded and handcuffed, to the Kamal Udwan hospital in Mashru' Beit Lahia. They were forced to take off all their clothes. The following day, Nasim was released. He hurried back to find his 4-year-old child at the school and to fetch what he could of their clothes and blankets. Nasim, in a picture I shared on social media, could be seen wearing a doctor's uniform. That was the only kind of clothes he could find. As soon as he arrived at the gate of the school, a sniper shot Nasim dead. Nasim's body was left for hours outside of the school, with no one being able to bring his body inside to bury it, for fear that they could be killed by a sniper. I'm talking to you from Cairo, where I'm staying with my wife and 3 kids, the youngest of whom, 3 years old, helped us to get out of Gaza. Whereas everyone in the world on Christmas Day were visiting their families and friends and exchanging kisses and hugs, I was unable to contact my parents and siblings and their children, the youngest of whom was 4 months old. I could not be sure whether my mother and father had food to eat and water to drink, whether they were breathing. I was born 31 years ago in a refugee camp, just a few kilometers from where Jesus was born. People in the world were commemorating the birth of Jesus, while we have been mourning the death of our family members. Once Israeli tanks retreated from certain areas, Gazans discovered corpses, mostly of children decaying, in the streets and under the rubble of the houses. Children constitute around half of Gaza's population. After each airstrike and artillery shelling, children, along with their parents and siblings, lose their lives. They are buried under the rubble of their bedrooms, which used to be their playrooms. I'm trying to imagine the future of these kids, who have witnessed at least 4 wars in the past 9 years. Those children who were pulled, amputated from under the rubble, or lost members of their families, what will become of them? I'm sure that not even the smartest psychologist or psychiatrist can fathom a right answer. In Gaza, we are not asking to impose a 2-state solution now, nor are we asking for the bringing back of the lives of our children and their families. We're asking the world to impose a ceasefire as soon as they hear our words. After the ceasefire, drones can stay in the sky. We don't mind anyone watching us retrieve the bodies of our loved ones. We don't mind the whole world watching us rebuild our homes and schools and plant our gardens. May next year come while Palestinians have their own airport and seaport, because it has been my dream not only to see Gaza from a plane window and from a distant ship, but to also take my family and friends to Times Square on Christmas Day, to have lunch in Washington, D.C., and later to show them the elegant campuses I visited. I also would love to welcome my international friends to Gaza, to take them to the strawberry farms in Beit Lahia, and to watch the sunset on the beach. For peace and for our children and for humanity, let there be a ceasefire. I'm going to read 3 poems before I end my speech. One of them is mine, and the other 2 were by fellow Gazan poets who are under fire. This is my poem. What a Gazan should do during an Israeli airstrike. Turn off the lights in every room. Sit in the inner hallway of the house, away from the windows. Stay away from the stove. Stop thinking about making black tea. Have a bottle of water nearby, big enough to cool down children's fear. Get a child's kindergarten backpack and stuff tiny toys and whatever amount of money there is, and the ID cards and photos of late grandparents, aunts or uncles, and the grandparents' wedding invitation that's been kept for a long time. And if you are a farmer, you should put some strawberry seeds in one pocket and some soil from the balcony flower pot in the other, and hold on tight to whatever number there was on the cake from the last birthday. The other 2 poems by Palestinian poets. One is named Ne'ma Hassan, and her poem, I'll read her poem in Arabic and then the translation, my translation. الأم في غزة لا تنام، تنصت للعتمة، تتفقد حواشيها، تفرز الأصوات صوتا صوتا، لتنتقي لها حكاية تليق بها، تهدد بها أطفالها، وبعد أن يغفو الجميع تقف درعا أمام الموت. الأم في غزة لا تبكي، تجمع الخوف، الغضب والدعاء في رئتيها، وتنتظر أن ينتهي أزيز الطائرات ليتحرر الزفير. الأم في غزة ليست ككل الأمهات، تصنع الخبز بملح طازج من عينيها وتطعم أبنائها للوطن. In Gaza, a mother never sleeps. She listens to the dark, search its edges, sorts out sounds, sound by sound, to select a suitable story to read her kids to sleep. When they sleep, she stands up to shield them from death. A mother in Gaza does not cry. She folds up fear, rage, and prayers in her lungs, and waits for the hum of warplanes to fade, then exhales. A mother in Gaza is not like any other mother. She bakes bread with her own eyes salt. She feeds her children to the homeland. The third poem and last one is by my friend Nasir Rabah, a very brilliant poet from Gaza. رسالة إلى الطيار. إلى الطيار الذي يعود الآن إلى مدرج الموقع العسكري بعد قصف غزة. ربما تخلع الآن تلك الخوذة الثقيلة وتبتسم لمستقبليك. ربما يهنئونك بالعودة السالمة من المهمة الخطيرة جدا، ولكنك الوحيد الذي يعرف حقيقة ما فعلته. عار عليك، عار عليك. يجب أن تضع التراب على رأسك وأن تبصق على وجهك في المرآة. هل هذا كل ما تعلمته؟ أن تقاتل البيوت والأرصفة دون مضادات أرضية لطائرتك المجهزة للمناورة والكر والفر، دون اشتباك جوي مع طائرات أخرى؟ اخجل من نفسك وأنت تشاهد الآن على التلفاز صغارنا تحت الأنقاض يلوحون بإصبعي النصر في وجهك حتى وهم ميتون. Letter to the pilot returning to the base after bombing Gaza. You might be taking off your heavy military helmet, smiling to those who greet you, and they might be congratulating you on a safe return from a very risky mission. But you are the only one who knows well what you have done. Shame on you. Shame on you. Spread dust over your head. Spit at your face in the mirror. Is this what you have been taught? To fight the houses and the streets, have no missiles against your fighter jet that flees through planeless sky? And when you watch our children under the rubble on your TV screen, they wave their hands in victory, even when dead. And the famous poet Mahmoud Darwish once said, I have learned and dismantled all the words in order to draw from them a single word, home. He also said, poetry and beauty are always making peace. When you read something beautiful, you find coexistence. It breaks walls down. I'm wondering, so end quote. I'm wondering now where the poets and writers of the world are. How many poems have been written to shield the children of Gaza? Let's together break the walls down and plant new and evergreen trees in their places. Let's break down the walls of hatred and war and plant trees of love and peace. Let's gather all the alphabets in the world and draw a masterpiece for everyone to live and rise. Let's draw a colorful home for all. Let's draw Palestine with our words and fill our and other people's hearts with only one liquid, love, the elixir of life. Thank you so much.
Mosab, thank you so much. I don't think anyone can listen to either your personal experiences or your poetry or the translations you've given us of other poets' works without just coming away with a deep sense of all that binds you to the tragedy of Gaza and why your words are so important tonight. Thank you for sharing that with us. What I'd like to do now is I would like to share with you, our viewers, the names of the authors that were shortlisted this year for the Palestine Book Award. I'll show you the covers of their books as well. It's not the same as the table in the P21 gallery, but I would encourage you to go out to your local bookshop or to click on your online distributor to support these authors and to treat yourself to some wonderful reading. I've certainly enjoyed each and every one of this year's shortlisted books, as I have for I can't count how many years that I have had the privilege of celebrating Palestine letters in the Palestine Book Award. Two of our books will not have their authors or other representatives here, so I will share them with you. To begin with, we have Samira Azam, Out of Time, translated by Rania Abdurrahman. This is a remarkable collection of short stories, and again, I could not recommend Samira's work to you more strongly. Then we have the memoir of Hussein Barghouti, Among the Almond Trees, translated with an introduction by Ibrahim Muhawi. But I am pleased to say that the remainder of the list is represented either by the authors or those who have been involved in publishing or translating these works. And what I'd like to do is, as I show you their book and read out their name, I'll call on the authors to give them a chance to share their solidarity with the people of Gaza. And then we'll come back to the content of their books when I hand the floor over to my friend and colleague, Nur Masalha, who will then name out those who have been this year's prize winners. So let me finish with the list of this year's shortlisted authors. And if I could call on the authors to make their statements to us, I'm going to begin with Ahad Tamimi and Dina Takruri. They called me a lioness. This is a Palestinian girl's fight for freedom. And I would like to hand the floor over. I see Dina is with us, and I believe Ahad is as well. Dina?
She is, yeah. I'd like her to speak first, then I'll say a few words afterwards. Go ahead, Ahad.
أول إشي بشكر Palestinian Book Awards. ثاني إشي بتمنى إنه العالم يرجع لنا أملنا بهاي الحياة كمان مرة، لأنه للأسف إحنا فقدنا إيماننا كل المنظمات الدولية، بكل المجتمع الدولي، وكل حتى فقدنا إيماننا بالإنسانية ومعناها بعد اللي شفناه واللي لسه بنشوفه من 100 يوم وأكثر. إنه الناس في إبادة بتصير بغزة والناس بتتفرج ومش عمالها بتعمل إشي، بس هيك كل العالم بتفرج من بعيد وفيش حد قادر يغير ولا أي شيء بسيط لهدول الناس اللي عمالهم بيموتوا. طبعا كانت فترة صعبة على جميع الفلسطينيين، ودائما زي ما أمي بتحكي، غزة ما خلتنا نقدر نعيش فرحنا ولا نقدر نعيش حزننا. إحنا بطلنا عارفين لا نحزن ولا عارفين نفرح. آه، أي إشي بسيط ممكن نحس فيه فرحة بأنب ضميرنا وبخلينا نخجل إنه نفرح، وهو أهلنا وإخوتنا عمالهم بموتوا بغزة، وحتى مش قادرين نزعل. آه، مش قادرين نزعل على ولا إشي، شو ما كان صعب نطلع على أهلنا بغزة إنه عمالهم بموتوا ومصيبتهم أعظم وأكبر من المصايب اللي بتصير معنا بألف مرة. فهذا الإشي خلانا ما نعرفش حتى نحزن، إنه إحنا شو زعلنا بده يكون جنبهم. شو شو بدنا ترجمة إذا بدك وبكمل.
No,
كملي.
go ahead.
إيش؟
بتكملي.
أوكي. آم، بتمنى إنه الأيام الجاي ما يكون في حرب. بتمنى إنه الأيام الجاي آه، م- تكون لقائنا الجاي عن كيف إنه نعمر غزة بعد الحرب، عن كيف إنه نعمر بلادنا بعد الخراب اللي عملوا فيها. آه، بتمنى إنه هاي اللقاءات الجاي تكون مش نحكي عن حرب ولا نحكي عن ولا عن قتل ولا عن إبادة بتصير. بدنا نحكي عن كيف بدنا نرجع نحاول نلملم شتات أنفسنا ونلملم الأشياء المتبقية إلنا عشان نرجع نخلق شوي حياة. طبعا هي مش راح تكون حياة طبيعية طول ما هذا الاحتلال موجود، بس على الأقل إن نرجع آم، يرجع عنا شوية أمل. بتمنى إنه الكتاب هذا اللي كتبناه أنا ودينا يكون فيه رسالة أو تجربة اللي ننقلها للعالم، اللي يحسوا هم يقرأوا بشعورنا، بشعور أي فلسطيني تعرض لانتهاك ولظلم بسبب الاحتلال. دائما لما كنت بقرأ أي كتاب كنت أو أي رواية كنت دائما بندمج جوا هاي الرواية وبتخيل حالي مكان هاي الشخصيات. فكان فكرة هاي الرواية إنه أخلي الناس اللي بتقرأ هذا الكتاب تعيش جزء من التجربة، يتخيلوا حالهم مكان الفلسطيني اللي انسجن، اللي انقتلوا أهله، اللي عاش حرب. يعيشوا جزء بسيط من تجربة الفلسطينيين والمعاناة اللي بيعيشوها تحت هذا الاحتلال. بتمنى إنه نقدر إحنا كمان بيوم من الأيام اللي ندخل غزة ونعمر غزة مع أهلها. دائما طول عمري كنت بحلم أو بحكي إنه نفسي أروح على بلادي اللي مانعني أدخلها. للأسف إنه خلونا نحلم إنه نفوت على غزة عشان نعمرها، مش بس عشان ننبسط فيها، لأنهم ما تركوا ولا أي إشي بغزة سليم، دمروا كل إشي. فبتمنى إنه بيوم نقدر ندخل غزة، نقدر إنه نعمر غزة من جديد. بتمنى إنه كل العالم يصحوا على حالهم. لأنه هاي الحرب أثبتت لكل العالم إحنا أحرار أكثر من أي حدا بالدنيا. آه، إنه الاحتلال مش بس احتلال الأرض، الاحتلال هو احتلال العقل، وللأسف إنه هذا الاحتلال تمكن إنه يحتل عقول كثير عالم. الضحية إحنا بنعاني من هذا الاحتلال وما فيش حد عانى بالعالم زي الشعب الفلسطيني. بس برغم كل هذا إحنا دائما بنحكي إنه الضحية مش بس الاحتلال احتل أرضه، الضحية اللي هو الاحتلال احتل عقله، اللي تنازل وخسر إنسانيته بسبب دعمه لهذا المحتل. الضحية هو اللي قبل على إنه يكون مساند وبدعم هذا الاحتلال. إنه الفلسطينيين طول عمرهم راح يضلوا مقاومين ومقاتلين عشان حرية بلدهم وأرضهم، مش بس ضحايا. بتمنى إنه الناس ما يعطونا بس شفقة وحزن. إحنا ما بدنا شفقة وما بدنا حزن، إحنا دموعنا بتروي الأرض كلها. عشان هيك ما بدنا لا عياط ولا دموع ولا حزن، ولا بدنا بس مجرد كلمات تواسونا فيها. احنا بدنا مقاومة حقيقية مع الشعب الفلسطيني، بدنا وقفة حقيقية مع الشعب الفلسطيني، لأنه طول ما فلسطين محتلة رح يضل كل العالم محتل.
And
Thank you so much, Dina. Let me pass over to you.
thank you, Ahad. I want to echo everything she said. I want to also say that I'm very happy to see Ahad safe. I'm very happy to see Mosab safe, and his words touched me so deeply. Alhamdulillah salama, and please continue to use your powerful voice. Our hearts are shattered over what's happening in Gaza right now, and for me, this just highlights the urgency of continuing to tell Palestinian stories and to amplify the voices in Gaza and in Palestine. I'm joining you from the US. I'm joining you as a Palestinian American author and journalist, and I just want to express my deep shame and anger at this Biden administration for its complicity in this genocide, which it could have stopped at any point. And yet it continues to fund, arm, and provide diplomatic and political cover to Israel as it commits war crime after war crime. This will remain a deep stain in our collective humanity and in our consciousness for generations to come. I want to highlight also that, as we know, this has been one of the deadliest conflicts on record for journalists, with over 100 journalists in Gaza now killed by Israel. And that includes my own colleagues at Al Jazeera, Samer Abu Toha, and most recently, Hamza Dahdouh. We call on the protection of all journalists in Gaza and in Palestine who are risking their lives every single day to deliver these pictures and to deliver the truth to the world. And we continue to say journalism is not a crime.
Dina, Ahad, thank you both so much. I know that you have an audience who hears every word you say and shares everything you feel. And in particular, the notion that Palestinians are not victims, but are fighters, and are fighting against the occupation of their land and their minds and their consciousness. And your hopes that they prevail are the hopes that we all share, and that brings us all together. So thank you very much, and thank you for your book. They called me a lioness. Get a hold of a copy of it now. Let's move on. I'd like to recognize Dareen Tatour. Her book, I Sing from the Window of Exile, من نافذة المغني غني. I only have it as a printout, but the poetry of one of the strongest and most eloquent voices of Palestine. And it's a real pleasure to have Dareen with us. I know that her very signal is fighting against the occupation, and that we hope we can have the privilege of hearing all of your words, Dareen. May I hand the floor to you, please?
Thank you. Thank you. I hope the internet will be good. And I will say a very short story I wrote about what happened in Gaza. And I think it's talking about everything I feel. And I want to say, of course, thank you about everything. Thank you for you. Thank you for the award, book award. Just I want to read in Arabic, and Neil helped me to read this story about Gaza in English. مسرح الضلال. اتكأت سميرة على جدار البيت وأبنائها الأربعة، ديما وحلا أحمد ورامي، تتوسطهم شمعة تضيء الظلمة. أحست بعطش شديد لكنها التزمت الصمت. اقتربت حلا من الشمعة وبدأت تلعب لعبة الظلال، تحاول أن ترسم الأشكال بظل يديها الصغيرتين على الجدار، تضحك وتصرخ بانفعال. هذه عصفورة صغيرة، هذه عصفورة صغيرة، انظروا إنها تطير. تحرك جسدها بخفة وتحرك ظل العصفورة معها. أحمد أحمد، أنت شجرة، لقد توقفت العصفورة على رأسك. أمسكها إن استطعت. تقف ديما على رجليها وأصابعها الصغيرة تلحق العصفورة، تحاول أن تمسكها. سمعت ضحكة عالية، ثم انفجار. يصرخ رامي في مستشفى الشفاء في غزة خصفتنا الطائرة أمي وإخوتي كلهم أشلاء. كنا نلعب مع الظلال. كنا نصنع مسرحا للظلال. Enel, can you?
Hello. Hi. This is from a new publication that we're rushing out at Drunk Muse Press in the next month, which is a publication by Dareen, which is short stories, impressions, and poems, called A Balcony Over a City Engulfed by War. And I think the idea that we've just come up with is that we'll read it together. So we'll read it slowly. And this is one of the short stories or sketches. It's called A Theatre of Shadows. Okay, Dareen. Samira leans against the wall of the house, surrounded by her 4 children, Dima, Hala, Ahmed, and Rami. In the middle of them is a candle that lights up the darkness. She is very thirsty, but remains silent. Hala approaches the candle and starts playing with it, with the shadows on the wall. She tries to draw shapes with her little hands. She laughs and shouts excitedly, "This is a little bird. Look at how it flies." She moves her body slightly, and the bird's shadow moves with her. Ahmed, you are a tree. The bird has stopped on your head. Catch it if you can. Dima stands on her feet, moves her little fingers, and tries to catch that bird. There is a loud laugh. Then an explosion. There is a loud laugh, then an explosion. Rami shouts in Al-Shifa Hospital in Gaza, "The plane bombed us. My mother, my brothers, they are all in pieces." We were playing with shadows. We were making shadow theatre.
Thank you, Nel. Just I want to say this is not story from my head. This story is happening in Gaza. This is family, my friend family. I lost before 1 month, something like this. It's hard. It's very hard times we live. We lost too much friends in Gaza. And I hope someone can to stop it, this war very soon. Thank you.
Dareen, thank you. Again, you speak for us all. We all hope that someone will stop this war that should never have started and should have ended so long ago. Let me continue with our shortlisted authors. I would like now to share with you the translation of Ghassan Kanafani's work on Zionist literature. This has been translated by Mahmoud Najib, and we have Louis Alday, the publisher, who will be able to speak on behalf of the translator and on Zionist literature. Louis, would you like to come in at this point?
Thank you, Professor Rogan. It's a real honor for me to be a part of this event. It's very, very moving listening to everyone's comments so far. And it probably goes without saying, but I am here in absolute and complete solidarity with the Palestinians and the Palestinian cause, and with all victims of Zionist barbarism, and in complete solidarity with those who fight against it. Of course, the author on Zionist literature, Ghassan Kanafani, is one of those victims. We published the book on the 50th anniversary of his death in 2022. He was killed in Beirut in 1972, as I'm sure you all know, and almost probably everyone listening knows. The reasons that I chose to pursue this project are manifold. and they relate both to the specifics of the book itself, its content, the context in which it was written, and who wrote it, and how he has come to be known, especially in the English-speaking world. And by that latter point, what I mean is that Ghassan Kanafani was many things, but he's primarily known in English as an author of fiction. And the overwhelming majority of his political non-fiction work has not been translated, which is now beginning to change. And actually, that was one of my motivations in selecting on Zionist literature, because he wrote so much important non-fiction that you have to start somewhere. But the specifics of why on Zionist literature was chosen, I mean, on a very basic level, when I read the original Arabic, it blew my mind. I was amazed by his analysis, the range of material that he was looking at, and the relevance of his analysis to the present moment. I mean, I probably read it for the first time about 6 or 7 years ago, but it's never been more relevant as right now. And so the book came out in 1967. So he's writing after the Naksa, after the disaster of 1967, and shortly before the PFLP is established. So he's writing at a very interesting historical juncture, which is essentially a moment of defeat. And you can tell, you feel from the text, it's this kind of furious attempt to understand how Israel has not only won militarily, politically, but it has an absolute stranglehold on the narrative, especially obviously in the West. And the book represents this incredible attempt on behalf of Ghassan to try and understand how has this happened, and specifically what role has literature played in that. And the reason, I think the moment the project formed in my head it was even just when I read the introduction, when he says, obviously I'm paraphrasing, but he says something along the lines of, this book is replete with, inaccurate, offensive Zionist lies about the Palestinian people and about Palestine. But I don't really bother to go into to refute them in detail. And actually, the only thing I'm really doing, and the only kind of the rationale of this entire book, is to know your enemy. And obviously, within 5 years of him writing that enemy had killed him. And that was a very kind of affecting moment. And the project, the publication, the translation, the amazing translation by Mahmoud Najib was carried out in exactly the same spirit. This was not just a question of intellectual curiosity. This is because the analysis that Kanafani offers in this book and many others and many other articles is directly relevant to the present moment. And I think, especially, like I say, especially in the English-speaking world, Kanafani had suffered a kind of softening that revolutionary figures after they've been killed often suffer. And his political work, his explicit, repeated endorsement of the centrality and righteousness of armed struggle has been lost, at times, I would say deliberately hidden. And I think that this book has continued relevance, and I even actually referenced it in an article that I wrote recently about the now dropped, but the initially very strong Hamas equals ISIS framing. There is direct relevance to what we have seen over the last 3 months. So I would encourage you all to read it if you haven't, and anyone listening. And I hope, and I know for a fact it has begun, not single-handedly, obviously, but I know there is at least 2 further translations of non-fiction work of Kanafani in the works, which I think to some extent has been kind of inspired and influenced by us doing this. And yeah, and just again to say, Mahmoud did a fantastic job with a challenging text in a number of ways. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Louis. I am struck by the importance of translation. I'm also struck by the fact that it weren't for you and me and maybe Victoria, who I see is on the line here too, it would be normal for us to have this conversation in Arabic. There's no reason for us to be gathering some of the greatest Palestinian writers into a webinar to force everyone to speak in the language of the British colonial occupier from that day or the American oppressor today. But what I would say is
يلا بنحكي بعربي.
طبعا يعني نعترف انه لولا لويس وانا طبعا كنا نحكي بالعربي. هذا يعني جائزة الكتب الفلسطينية. بس في نفس الوقت من خلال الترجمة نفتح شباك عظيم إلى العالم الغربي حتى الأجانب يفهموا حال الفلسطينيون بالمعنى السياسية أو الاجتماعية. The work being done to take the political writings of someone so widely respected as Ghassan Kanafani and adding that to the canon of Palestinian writing is so important. And I will be ensuring that as I teach, it goes into my work, that my students will know about this. We all read the novels, but opening that window through translation is such an important contribution. And I wish to salute not just you, Louis, and Mahmoud, but of course Ghassan Kanafani for his brilliance, lost to us through the occupation and its attacks in Beirut so long ago. Let's move on. We have with us Nadim Bawelsa, who has made a remarkable contribution to the scholarship on Palestine through his new book, Transnational Palestine, Migration and the Right of Return Before 1948. This book has been published by Stanford University Press, one of the leading academic presses publishing on scholarship in the world. Nadim, could I open the floor to you?
Thank you so much for those very generous words, Dr. Rogan, and thank you to MEMO and to the Palestine Book Award for this incredible opportunity. It's an honor to be with you all, to be with some of the most important voices from Palestine of our time. So it's an absolute honor to be here. Of course, there's nothing I can say that could in any way overshadow any of the powerful words of Dareen and Mosab, or in any way sort of compare. I'm here in Amman. I live in Jordan, safe, alhamdulillah. But as any Palestinian in exile knows, the sort of the anguish of witnessing genocide as a Palestinian, and from so close, yet so far away, right? That cheesy saying is something I've been thinking about quite a lot. I work now as an editor with the Journal of Palestine Studies under the Institute for Palestine Studies. So we receive daily tens of testimonies from folks all over the world wanting to comment or reflect on what's happening, whether from Palestine, from Gaza, from Daffa, from 48, or from anywhere in exile. And it's my job to edit these pieces and then publish them and distribute them. So it's a huge honor to be able to do that. And for the last 3 months, we've been receiving an impressive, let's say, a very impressive amount of content to process and publish. It's certainly been overwhelming, but it's felt like the least I can do, not just as an editor, but as a Palestinian in exile, as a thinker, as someone who has passion for writing, for crafting language, and then presenting it, for educating and so on. I would say one aspect of the work that I do and being here in Jordan doing it is realizing how little attention is given to Jordan as a Palestinian space, and what it means to be home to over 7 million Palestinians out of 11 million total people. So I've been reflecting a lot on this the last 3 months, living here with family, being in the streets with comrades, with fellow citizens, recognizing everyone around me is somehow identifies as Palestinian, whether their grandparents came in 48, 67, or they themselves came, whatever document they carry in their hand. You know, there's the multi-tiered system of documentation Palestinian refugees hold in the region is really absurd. But, you know, since October 7th, there hasn't been a day that the streets here haven't been crowded with protesters. The idea that the largest concentration of Palestinians in the world is here and not in Palestine at this time is very strange to think of. But I think it's something that I've decided to dwell on as a source of hope, because nothing's been the same since October 7th for any of us. And I think for us in exile just less than 60 kilometers away from Jerusalem, it's meant something significant. So I've been writing a bit, and I thought, you know, to maybe read just 2 passages from something I wrote last week, marking the 100th day of genocide. 100 days into the genocide, October 7th remains the closest we Palestinians in Jordan have ever come to realizing return. Watching those Palestinian fighters breach those fences and walls around Gaza by foot and through the air continues to give us hope even our grandparents never thought they would live to experience. What those fighters did on that hot Sunday morning was to transform decades of abstract words about return in the form of song, poetry, and prose into action. Abstract words over which we Palestinians in Jordan, a stone throw away on the east bank of the river, have anguished. The morning of October 7 was the first time since 1948 that return was realized, and we Jordanians who are Palestinians, carrying multicolored documents, if any at all, have not been the same since. We no longer need to only imagine ourselves reclaiming what's ours. We can now visualize ourselves actually walking and flying home in our millions. In the days, months, but hopefully not years ahead, as we continue to witness our vengeful settler occupiers take up weapons to annihilate us and our families, or rush to their airports to flee their colonies, we will continue to confirm what we have always known. Theirs was never and will never be a true attachment to the land. Who could terrorize that land and then abandon it? And in Jordan, in a country where more than half of 11 million inhabitants are Palestinians dreaming of the option of return, we are now armed with confirmable knowledge, with vivid images of the actualization of our return. We are armed with the knowledge of Israel's perishability, of the fact that it has already lost, certainly among the people. However long it takes, Israel's defeat is irreversible, as is our path home. We can see it on our screens, and we can feel it in the same Mediterranean air that reaches us here, across Churchill's false border, once it's passed over our grandparents' homes. Thank you.
Thank you, Nadeem. And thank you for sharing your most recent writings with us. We celebrate tonight a book that came out last year, but we can sense that there's a great deal more that will be coming from you, not least on the Palestinian experience in Jordan, of which there's a lot to be said. The last of our shortlisted books from 2023 is by Tahrir Hamdi, Imagining Palestine, Cultures of Exile and National Identity. The cover photograph showing you the face of a young Palestinian girl holding up the ubiquitous symbol of the right of return, the key of the family from their homes left behind in 1948. And I'd like to invite Tahrir to speak to us at this point.
Thank you very much, Eugene, and I really want to thank everybody for their very impactful words. I was very much touched by Mosab's poetry and everybody else's amazing stuff, really, and I think we need to get it out to the world. The world is listening now. My book, Imagining Palestine, is very much about hope. Hope in bringing Palestine into reality, imagining Palestine into reality. It's very much an anticipatory discourse. For me, imagining Palestine, as I say, as an anticipatory endeavor becomes possible where Palestinian defiance and hope in a future independent Palestine is just as strong, if not stronger. And I do want to emphasize and underscore, actually much stronger than Israel's brutal aggression and oppression. In my book, I cover many aspects of Palestinian life. I talk about poets, novelists, revolutionary figures. I interviewed people like Layla Khalid, people like Prof. Nur Masalha, people like Ilan Pape, and I also interviewed Rifat Al-Arir in the year 2022. So this is what I focused on in my word and what I want to tell you today. First of all, I think, as we all know, thanks to historians like Nur Masalha and Ilan Pape, we know now that it was Zionist, what Zionist thought is all about. Zionist thought, this is what led to the creation of the brutal Zionist colony, and it was based on two main strategies, and that is genocide and expulsion. Ever since the creation of the Zionist colony in 1948, the Palestinians have been experiencing an ongoing Nakba, the most brutal of which is the Gaza genocide of 2023-2024, which we are witnessing in real time. Over 30,000 martyrs now, not counting the seriously injured and those dying of hunger at the present moment, as we are broadcasting the Palestine Book Awards. The Palestinian people have taught the world a lesson of iconic bravery, courage, and sumud. They live in sumud. Palestinians have taught the world how to live even as they die. What is happening in Gaza now is indeed a genocide, the killing and displacement of the entire Palestinian population in Gaza. But Israel also carries out targeted killings, not only of resistance leaders, but also intellectuals, thinkers, scientists, precisely because these people are the builders and shapers of the future. By killing these thinkers and intellectuals, Israel hopes to kill the future and to make imagining Palestine impossible. By assassinating people like Ghassan Kanafani in 1972, Naji Ali in 1987, and most recently Rifat Al-Arir in December of 2023, Israel hopes to assassinate the very idea of liberation. To quote the title of an article by the British journalist Victoria Britton, they had to die. Assassination against liberation. Rifat knew that Israel was after him. They told him. They wanted to silence his powerful voice. Rifat was an intellectual, a poet, a professor at the Islamic University of Gaza. Now, there is no Rifat and no university. In one of his last tweets, Rifat wrote, quoting, "I wish I were a freedom fighter, so I die fighting back those invading Israeli genocidal maniacs, invading my neighborhood and city," end of quote. But now Rifat is one of the more than 30,000 martyrs in Gaza. But Rifat never wanted to be a number. In fact, he started a project with some friends called We Are Not Numbers. And Rifat said that he wanted his death to bring hope. He told us that if he must die, let it be a tale. I interviewed Rifat in the year 2022 for my book, Imagining Palestine. And what Rifat told me is exactly what is happening in occupied Palestine now. Rifat could see what many could not see. And I want to read to you from page 204. When I asked Rifat here, I asked Rifat about resistance strategies. What sort of resistance strategies he believes in? This is what he said. All means of resistance are legitimate and even moral. For Rifat, as he told me in conversation, such brutal settler colonialism must be countered by using all means possible. He explains that Israel's continuous ethnic cleansing and genocide of the Palestinian people, quote, proves that it is not only armed Palestinian resistance that Israel is after. Israel is after the very existence of Palestinians, end of quote. Larir is accurate here. Israel does not only want to destroy the armed resistance. Israel's exaggerated use of violence, using the most destructive weapons known to man against civilians in Gaza, is aimed at terrorizing people, breaking their will by means of Israel's false and baseless hope that Palestinian people will eventually surrender. Just get up and leave. Rifat argues that Israel has massacred Palestinians even during peaceful protests, such as the Great March of Return in Gaza, where hundreds of unarmed Palestinians, including young medics and people in wheelchairs, were mercilessly killed by Israeli snipers. It was hunting season for the brutal occupier. In the occupied West Bank, where there is no organized armed resistance, says Rifat, Palestinians are slaughtered on a daily basis, their homes demolished and their lands stolen from them. I asked Rifat what kind of Palestine he imagines in the future, and this is what he said. One democratic state for all, regardless of religion or color or race, in a free Palestine from the river to the sea. However, after the total dismantlement of Israel, Rifat underscores, all racist Zionists who have blood on their hands must be tried for war crimes and crimes against humanity. And I think if he were living today, Rifat would be at least satisfied to know what South Africa has done. So if you are listening, Rifat, your death, your martyrdom, like the martyrdom of tens of thousands of Palestinians in Gaza and elsewhere, has indeed become a tale, a story of sumud, courage, and life, and what life is worth. Now, I'd like to end, and I'd like to repeat the promise and collective prayer that I made at the end of my book, Imagining Palestine, because when I was writing the book, finishing it, I experienced some very difficult things myself, deaths in my own family, and I was very much in pain as I was writing, and I felt it's a very Palestinian experience. This is what I say at the end of my book. During the writing of this book, many Palestinians in blood and heart, who are an integral part of the Palestinian narrative and revolution, which is still being written, passed from this life before fulfilling their dream of return. I name some of them here. To quote the Irish poet William Butler Yeats, to murmur name upon name as a mother names her child, my father, Khalil Ismail Hamdi, one of the founders of the Arab nationalist movement and the armed struggle for the liberation of Palestine. My brother, Hamdi Khalil Hamdi, the scientist who rooted his science in the very nature of Palestine. The two great Palestinian poets, Murid Barghouti, who sang of Palestine's repeated historical pain, and Izz-ad-Din al-Manasra, whose only wish was not to sleep in a grave in exile. The fearless professor and oppositional intellectual who spoke truth to power, Abdus Sattar Qasim, and who wanted to take part in this conversation, but left us before he could. And Anis al-Naqash, the great Lebanese revolutionary, who was every bit a Palestinian, and who, when he knew of the imminence of his own death, wrote, "My life is done, but the Palestinian narrative has not ended. To all the martyrs of Palestine, we promise you to continue the struggle until there is a collective return to Palestine that would truly enable the Palestinian people to finally realize their genuine liberation." Tahrir. Thank you.
Tahrir, if there were a way to get the audience to applaud, you would be deafened by the roar of those who have joined to watch tonight. And I think it's wonderful to have had your powerful words on which to close this part of the evening. As these events are normally organized, it's over 2 days. And the first day, we have a panel discussion with the authors, and then on the second day is the award ceremony. And as those of you who know me over many years now, I've always run away from the second day. I love the first event because all the shortlisted authors are, in my eyes, prize winners. Each one of these books is such a remarkable contribution. Each one is a brilliant example of the very samud that each of you have been calling for in your own works. And I don't envy the judges who have to choose between the amazing books on this shortlist to decide which of the ones they actually decide to make a Palestine Book Award to. But on this call, there are a number of the judges who are here with us. So I salute you. And ordinarily, I would click off at this point and leave, but I feel that steadfastness requires that I break my own habits and I stay right through to the end and hear the announcements of this year's awards. To do so, I call on my dear friend Nur Masalha, who will be speaking on behalf of the judges to talk you through their decisions. Nur, the rest of the evening is to you. That was so dramatic, and yet I'm hearing nothing from Nur. Have we lost Nur on the call? You better hope that we haven't lost Nur, because I'm not pulling your leg. I'm not one of the jury, and I don't have a clue who's won any prizes this year. So I'm very much hoping we can get Nur back to complete the process. Aisha, are you still with us?
I think he was disconnected, but maybe he will be coming soon.
Yeah, he's joining us now. He's joining us now. Sorry.
Nur, are you there? It's been a hard night, dear friends. So to end with a bit of comedy is not bad. It's funny, Dareen, I thought if we were going to lose anyone this evening, it was you. The idea that the occupation extends to central London is really worrying.
I'm sorry about that.
Astaghfirullah. So glad to have you with us. I see Masal coming on. I'm going to assume that's Nur. He's still muted. Nur, are you there? Unmute yourself. We're dying of suspense here. If you're not careful, I'm going to slip into speaking Arabic again, which will take everyone to hang up on the call.
I can say a few words for the judges until he's ready, maybe.
Afaf, I think as well.
Okay,
There we have him.
I'm back, actually. I'm really sorry about this. It wasn't my fault. مساء الخير للجميع. And let me begin with a big thank you to our speakers, amazing speakers. Listening to the speakers and the first part, it really amazes me how inspiring our people are, how resilient people are, and how people, despite the horrific scenes we have from Gaza, our people are incredibly resilient. The first part of this evening focused on solidarity with Gaza. So I'm not going to go back to this. I'm going to move very quickly to the second part of the evening, which is focusing on the books, on the winning categories of the books. And just to say that our judges, Dawood, Afaf, Ashjan, Firas, Ibrahim, and Sawad, we found it very difficult this year to choose the shortlist and also to choose the winners. We had 55 books submitted, an incredibly long list, a milestone in the history of the Palestine Book Awards, a huge list, enormous variety, diversity, the richness of the list. And I do want to actually say that our Palestinian narrative is winning. Just to look at this list of publication and submission to the, but I want to link the first part and the second part of this evening, the first part about Gaza and the second part specifically about the books. And I want to say that the Palestine Book Awards and cultural resistance and solidarity with Gaza go hand in hand. Let me take you quickly, without further ado, to the winning categories this evening. Our judges have decided on 5 winning categories: creative, إبداع, academic, الكتاب الأكاديمي, translation, ترجمة, memoirs, مذكرات, and counterculture, الثقافة المضادة أو الثقافة المقاومة. And also we have a Lifetime Achievement Award winner event, which I will announce. So I'm beginning to actually announce the winners. And for the first category of creative ibda, the winner is Dareen Tutur. I sing from the window of exile. Dareen, can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
Okay, so you are the winner. You've got the chance to talk about the book, not about Gaza, specifically about your poetry, your amazing poetry. Tell us more about your work in this specific book.
Yeah, thank you. This book I wrote when I was in Sweden and in prison. I talk in the book about my feeling that I live in prison, especially in prison, and after then in Sweden, when I was in Sweden, that I was in exile. Very close to be 3 years, and in the prison I was stayed in prison very close to be 3 years again. And all this period I have too much feeling. I make it all this feeling in my writing, and this is what I do with these poems. I have just what was happening with me in prison and in exile. I wrote the poems. This how I get this book to the world, just to say to the people a message that what the prisoners feel, what the people, the Palestinian people feel when they was in exile, or the refugees, or everyone have the feeling far from the homeland. And I think this especially suffers too much people, Palestinian people suffering about this feeling. And when I was in Sweden, I feel a very strange feeling, and I don't can to continue my life normal, because that I have my decision to back to Palestine and to live in this dangerous living. This book is very special for me, and I'm very happy this moment, because it's very strange feeling, because at yet I don't know how is the book, how my book, and really I'm I don't know what to say about that, but thank you, Neil. Thank you for the publisher that believe about these poems, and
it's amazing. It's amazing book of poetry, and also coming from a relatively young person. And I know you are a photographer, Doreen, and is there any connection briefly between your photography and your poems? This is what I felt, Ashley. Is there any point, Ashley, you want to make about this issue?
Yes. Really, when I wrote any poems, I directly shot some photos about the feeling that I feel in the poems. And the same, when I was shooting some photos, I write a poetry about that. And this what happened with this book. All the poems in the book, I have photos for this poems. And the cover, I shot it. It's like it's very like a documentary live. I make my my poetry, documentary poetry about my life, and the same with my photos I make.
Brilliant, yeah. Keep up the good work. I'll move on to the second category, which is academic, and the winner is Nadim Bawalsa, Transitional Palestine, Migration and the Right of Return. Nadim, you talked a bit about the right of return after 1948, but this book is about the right of return before 1948. Can you tell us more about this book?
Oh, sure. Thank you so much for this honor. I can't. I'll try to be as brief as possible, but the book traces the struggle for the right of return, for the Palestinian right of return, 23 years prior to the one we know to have started in 1948. It examines specifically the British Mandate period and the legislation that British Mandate authorities or legislated in Palestine, specifically the Palestinian Citizenship Order in Council in 1925, through which the British naturalized tens of thousands of incoming Jewish immigrants or settlers to Palestine as Palestinians at the expense of tens of thousands. By 1936, we're talking about 40,000 Palestinians who had migrated to Latin America, starting up to 40 years prior to the mandate, for economic opportunity. And they had been, like Lebanese and Syrian and, sort of all communities of the old world, especially the Mediterranean basin, had been doing for much of the latter half of the 19th century and early 20th. They had been migrating back and forth and bringing back money and riches and building homes and bringing relatives back with them and reestablishing Jaliat or migrant communities in abroad. But the Palestinians were the only ones who were denied the citizenship of the nations that they were to inherit through the mandate system. Unlike the Lebanese and the Syrian migrants who were applying for French, Lebanese, and French Syrian citizenship while abroad, the Palestinians were denied it because, and that's what the book examines, because of British priorities to the Zionists and to inhabiting Palestinians or Palestine with Jewish settlers and naturalizing them as Palestinians. Some British authorities even said, well, simply Palestine won't fit enough of these migrants wishing to settle Palestine, so we'll just prioritize the Jews over the indigenous Palestinians. So rather than that being the only story of the book, the more important, I think, and relevant aspect of the book is the struggle for return and what these migrant communities from all the way from North America to the southern tip of South America, from New York to Santiago, Chile, Mexico City, Monterrey, Saltillo, Honduras, Peru, Argentina, Brazil, everywhere. They're gathering together, drafting petitions, sending them to Geneva, to London, to Jerusalem, protesting, using the very language used by the British in their international legal treatises, like the Treaty of Lausanne and the Treaty of Sèvres, these laws that formed the foundations of international law that we know today about citizenship rights and nationality rights. So what we're seeing happening today in the ICJ and the ICC, whether it's Palestinians themselves or those defending them, using the very language crafted by the colonizers and these global empires, using it against them is something the Palestinians had been doing in the Americas for quite a long time, well before 1948. Very, very strategic language that they would not only research, but then get translated, because they would be writing in either Spanish or Arabic, depending where they were, and then getting it translated into English, sent to vice consulates across the Americas. And then those vice consuls would send these petitions off to London or Jerusalem or Geneva. So is this incredible network of activism that really started at the grassroots level by Palestinians and their allies, much like what we're seeing today. And of course, one could say, well, it didn't work back then. What's to think it would work now? Absolutely. But it doesn't mean that that we don't keep trying, and it doesn't mean that the narrative of sort of, now that we have the legal backing, or now that we have the foundations of international law with us, what does that mean for us in these courts of law? What does it mean to send a petition versus appearing before the ICJ and staking a claim to these judges? It remains to be seen, but I'm hoping that what this book does is empower more communities across the world, not only to seek justice, whether through international legal forums or through petition writing or through newspapers or through any means of activism at their disposal, but to also come together and realize that Palestine is everywhere. Palestine is in the Andes. Palestine is in the Amazon. Palestine is all over the Americas, Europe. It's as far as the Philippines. Jacob Norris found Palestinian Bethlehemites selling mother of pearl as early as 1900, if not before, in the ports of Manila. So we are everywhere. Our documents are everywhere. Our struggle to return is a century old. In fact, it's not. It's just 75 years old. What that means, I think, remains to be seen. But I hope it brings more people together, more people to go visit those archives, more people to now use social media to connect with Palestinians in Chile and Honduras and Peru and Haiti and all over. And what this means for Palestine itself, I hope, in the least, is a sense of empowerment, a sense of feeling less alone in this, and the reality that we know to be Palestine.
Wonderful, Nadim. We, the judges, agreed this is a unique book. So congratulations. I'll move on to our third category, which is translation. And the winner is Ibrahim Mohawi, who could not be with us tonight, Among the Almond Trees. I'll just say something about actually Hussein Barghouti, the author of this incredibly important memoirs. Hussein actually died in 2002, but he was a polymath. He was a poet, he was a writer, he was an academic, an essay, a critic, a lyricist, a playwright, a philosopher, and also he taught for business at university. But sadly, he developed cancer in his late 40s, and he wrote these memoirs after he was quite ill. And this is actually a meditation on his childhood in his village in central Palestine, and on his house, and on his return to his village in Palestine. And also the way he describes his house surrounded by olive and fig trees and almond trees. It's an incredible memoirs, and also by a prolific Palestinian author and someone who deserves to be recognized. Unfortunately, Ibrahim Mohawi wasn't with us tonight, so I'll have to actually move on to the our fourth winning category, which is memoirs. And the winners are Ahed Tamimi and Dina Takruri. Ahed, congratulations. Can you hear me? Hello? They called me a lioness.
Yeah, I think she's muted, but we'll get her back on.
She's muted, okay.
Maybe.
Do you want to say something about, they called me a lioness, Dima? I know you are a co-author.
Yes. Ahed, are you there? Do you want to say something first?
كذا
احكي
كان
بعربي مش
قطع
مهم.
من عندي. بدنا أحكي بالأول بعدين بحكي.
Okay. Well, first of all, thank you so much. This is such a great honor, and it's an honor to be recognized among such incredible Palestinian voices. I want to say Mabruk to Ahed, and I want to congratulate her and thank her for this project that we embarked on. You know, I first met Ahed in 2018, right when she was released from prison. And she was only 17 years old at the time. And I was lucky to get one of the first interviews with her for AJ+. And this girl was fresh out of prison, surrounded by press, reeling from the trauma of 8 months in prison as a teenager. And I was completely blown away by just how powerful and steadfast and inspiring she was, and how she articulated the hopes and the grievances and the pain of Palestinians, and just her conviction, her absolute conviction, which remains to this day, that Palestine will be free and that she will hopefully be among the last generation of Palestinians to live this life under a brutal military occupation that has robbed her and so many others of so much. So we embarked on this project together. It's her memoir. They called me a lioness, a Palestinian girl's fight for freedom, but it's also the story of every other Palestinian child growing up like her. You know, I really tried to write this in a way that honored her voice, and also made it very accessible and digestible to an American audience and to English speakers everywhere that don't know anything about Palestine. And what has given me a lot of hope since October 7th is how thousands of people have bought it. And if you look on TikTok, you see girls, teenagers, American ones, like doing book reviews, and so many messages that I get daily saying that people didn't understand anything about Palestine, but this book really helped them understand, and it made them feel. I want to recognize that, you know, since its publication, Ahed was arrested once again and was incarcerated for no reason, for no charge whatsoever, and was imprisoned under very harsh circumstances. And that other people that we write about in the book, including her father, Bassem Tamimi, remains in an Israeli prison right now under administrative detention. They have no way of contacting him. And we call on his immediate release. Khaled al-Jarrar, who we also write about, was rearrested weeks ago, remains in an Israeli prison under administrative detention. And we call for her release again. We're deeply worried and concerned about them. This occupation is out of control, and Israel is really escalated next level genocidal mania, which is alarming to all of us, but we remain steadfast in our hope and hopeful in our dream of liberation and freedom for everyone. So thank you to everyone, and I'd love for Ahed to say something.
Thank you, Dina.
Or go ahead. Sorry.
أول شيء شكرا لكم، وشكرا لدينا اللي كانت الشخص اللي بقدر أحكي له كل مشاعري بكل راحة، لأني أنا طول عمري بني آدمة ما بحكي عن مشاعري ولا عن أي إشي بخصني، فكانت دينا من الناس القلال كثير اللي قدرت إنه أكون على طبيعتي معهم. بدي أشكر أبوي اللي لولا أنا ما قدرت أعمل ولا أي إشي، اللي هو هسه موجود بالسجن. بدي أهديه هذا الإنجاز وأحكي له أنا يعني مش راح أقدر أفرح غير لما تنتهي الحرب ولما يكون بيننا. لا بدي أشكر كمان خالدة جرار اللي كانت الحدا اللي وعاني على كتير شغلات، واللي هي هسه برضه موجودة بالسجن، اللي أعطتني هذا طول أنا بالسجن، أعطتني أمل إنه إحنا السجن ما بحطمنا، السجن ما بكسرنا. بالعكس كانت سند إلي جوا السجن، كانت معلمة وحدا بتعلم منه كثير شغلات. للأسف إني مش قادرة أعطي هاي الفرحة حقها، لأنه زي ما حكيت غزة ما خلتنا نقدر نعيش فرحتنا ولا نعيش حزننا كمان. وبتمنى إنه هذا الكتاب يكون علم كثير ناس عن القضية الفلسطينية. بتمنى إنه ما حد يقدر يضطر يكتب مذكرات زي هاي أو كتاب زي هذا بحياته، لأنه ما كانش إشي سهل، ما كانش إشي. كنت بتذكر كنت كل مرة نقعد أنا ودينا تسألني سؤال وأشرح لها عن إيش صار معي، بالليل أبلش أحلم وكوابيس عن الإشي هذا اللي صار معي. فكان كتير صعب إنه أرجع زي كأني بدي أحكي كل إشي من أعماقي أو من جواي وأطلع كل إشي أنا كنت بحاول أنساه. فبتمنى إنه ما حدش يضطر يكتب كتاب زي هذا. بتمنى الكتاب الجاي يكون عن مذكراتنا بالحرية والنصر إن شاء الله. وبتمنى إنه هذا عن جد يكون هذا الكتاب علم كثير ناس عن شو القضية الفلسطينية.
عهد، أنت اشتهرتي كطفلة مناضلة واشتهرتي بالإعلام وكلنا تعرفنا عليك كطفلة اللي وقفتي قدام الاحتلال وجنود الاحتلال. السؤال، كتابة المذكرات هاي أثرت عليك شخصيا من ناحية تفكيرك، أسلوبك، من ناحية تطورك كمؤلفة ككاتبة، كيف تأثير المذكرات عليك شخصيا وعلى مستقبلك؟ كيف تفكري بالنسبة لمستقبلك ككاتبة؟
بقدرش أحكي لك إنه هاي المذكرات أثرت علي إنه كتبتها، لأنه هاي إشي أنا بالفعل عايشته، يعني هو أثر علي لأني أنا عشته مش لأني أنا كتبته. فالتأثير كان بإني أنا عشت هيك إشي، مش أنا كتبت هيك إشي. تأثير أنا قدرت أكتب أو أنا بقدر أكتب لأني عشت هذا الإشي، مش لأني كتبت عن المذكرات أو الإشي اللي صار معي. يعني بتمنى إنه بفكر يعني صرت بفكر لقدام إنه ممكن أكتب كمان بالعربي، ممكن أكتب إشي تاني أو نوع تاني من الكتب، بس إنه ما كانش إشي إنه كتابة هاي المذكرات هي اللي أعطت علي تأثير. لا بالعكس، هو الإشي اللي عشته هو اللي خلاني أصلا أتأثر وأكتب هاي المذكرات. هاي
Ahmed and Dima, congratulations. Memoir, social memory, social history. This is one of our greatest contribution to Palestine studies. And I think we need more and more memoirs. We need more and more social memory, and I think social memory is also the way we speak, the way we represent ourselves, the way we define ourselves, the way we institute and constitute, and it's a form of self-determination. So congratulations to both of you. I'll move on to the fifth category, which is, we call it counterculture, and the winner is Tahrir Hamdi, Imagining Palestine. Tahrir, do you want to say something about your theoretical approach and intellectual approach, and why imagining Palestine? Tahrir, can you hear me?
Unmute, yes, okay. Thank you very much, Nur. My book, Imagining Palestine, is really about hope. I wanted to present a sort of encyclopedia of Palestinian resistance, Palestinian cultural resistance, in addition to, of course, what we naturally know as armed resistance, but I very much believe in what the great theorists of revolutionary thinking and writing believe, that in order to have a successful revolution, in order to have successful armed resistance, one needs to have a very strong base of cultural resistance. Frantz Fanon said it, Amilcar Cabral said it, Edward Said said it. So I think that is very much an important part of my book. But also my book focuses on small spaces that have become very important sites of resistance. What I mean by that is like the margins of society, the margins of intellectuality. For example, if you look at refugee camps, they are marginalized places, but that is where resistance is born. In the same way that for Edward Said, for example, the intellectual is the person who is restless, who lives on the margins of society, metaphorically speaking, who is not satisfied with how things are. So the intellectual is very much related to the person living in a refugee camp. And the idea is to resist the hegemonic center, to resist oppression. And for me, imagining Palestine is the power to revolt, the power to resist, and the power to make real. We see that in the poetry of Mahmoud Darwish. We see that in the poetry of Murid Barghouthi, who is always imagining victory. We see that in the writings of Ghassan Kanafani, who is a novelist and essayist and political thinker and revolutionary thinker. And I want to mention Louis Alday here and thank him for his book. It's a brilliant book. And I'm working with a colleague of mine, Louis Breheny, on a book on Kanafani's political thought. So that should be coming out in 2024. So I feel that poetry, novels, memoirs, armed resistance, everything comes together. And this is what I wanted to show in my book. So it is the promise of a real, genuine liberation that I am certain is going to happen. I feel it. I felt it when I was writing the book. I felt it in the words of the people I interviewed, like Layla Khalid and Rifat, Allah yarhamu, and your own words, your words, Nur, and Ibrahim Ode, and all the Ilan Pape as well, who also very recently announced the beginning of the end of the Zionist project. So I very much believe that we are at the very edge, and we are almost there. And I do believe in a collective return to Palestine, and it will happen, and in our lifetime. Thank you very much, Nur.
I love your work, and I know you focus on key figures such as Mourid al-Barghouthi and Mahmoud Darwish and some of our best intellectual, Edward Said. But for someone living in Amman, and Amman is surrounded by refugee camps in Jordan, and I think these cultures of exile of the marginalized Palestinians in these refugee camps around Amman, how do they actually connect with this, if you like, engaged intellectuals? You know, is there any connection going on between these marginalized communities and some of our best intellectuals?
Absolutely. And this is the connection I make in my book, actually. For the marginalized in refugee camps, they live in temporariness, okay? This temporariness is almost like permanent, okay? It's a permanent temporariness. They are waiting in the same way that Naji al-Ali's Handala is waiting. They are waiting to return. They are restless. They are living in extreme poverty. They live in exile in the same way that the true intellectual, and this is what Edward Said means by what is an intellectual? An intellectual is a person who speaks on behalf of the oppressed. An intellectual does not live in an ivory tower, okay, and who is specialized in a certain, let's say, era or let's say genre of writing. An intellectual is a person who speaks for the oppressed and fights for the oppressed. So the intellectual then, if we see it in this way, lives in exile, a mental and metaphorical exile, and the refugee resident lives in a real physical geographical exile. The connection is clear. This kind of a lack of satisfaction, a lack of comfort, a restlessness that we all must have. Because when we look at what is happening today in Gaza, we are seeing a genocide happening in real time, videos. We did not see what happened in 1948. We found out later on, for example, when we heard about Tantura, but what we're seeing now is something happening in real time. So, but the fear is, the fear that I have is that this kind of genocide may become the normal. It's like we are normalizing it. We are almost becoming numb to it. And I think this is what we have to guard against. We cannot normalize genocide. We cannot normalize refugee camps. We cannot normalize displacement. And this is basically what my book is about, but also at the same time, my book is about hope. It is about imagining Palestine and imagining the true liberation of Palestine, which I really believe is going to happen.
We are enormously indebted to you and very proud of you. And I know you are one of our leading intellectuals. Congratulations to you. I'll move on to another important contributor actually to Palestine studies. And this time it's Lifetime Achievement Award. And the winner is Dr. Rosemary Sire. Rosemary and I have been friends for what, three decades now. And I kind of was thinking about, how much contribution, how much work she's done on a whole range of things. But I think I'm going to leave it to Rosemary to talk about her contribution to a whole range of avenues in Palestine studies. Rosemary, can you hear me? Rosemary? Can you mute yourself?
She's not here, no.
Nur, it seems that she's left the session
Has
according
she?
to the chat line. I haven't seen her come back on.
Okay. Is there any way of finding out? If not, I'll just
I think she's left the session.
has she left the session? Okay. I mean, the first time I actually heard about Rosemary Sayegh was through her seminal book, From Peasants to Revolutionaries. And it was published in the late 70s by Zed. And Rosemary once told me that at the time, Zed Books was the only publisher actually prepared to publish her work. There were no publishers in London prepared to publish such a work. And since then, actually, the book was reprinted many times. But Rosemary taught me many things. She taught me the importance of Palestinian oral history. Again, it's actually from talking to Rosemary directly. And she once came to me and said, Nur, you've been writing so much about archives and archival sources and British archival sources and Israeli archival sources. Why aren't you writing about oral history of Palestine and Palestinians? And she was a pioneer in this direction. From the 80s or early 80s, she began collecting testimonies of refugees in Lebanon, of women in refugee camps in Lebanon. So she combined oral history with her work on Palestinian refugee women in the camps of Lebanon. So I think she pioneered two areas or two avenues. One is oral history of Palestine, which encouraged her work, encouraged centers at Birzeit University, centers at Beirut now, the Nakba archives, to go in that direction. I think oral history of Palestine and the Palestinian Nakba, this is something we usually indebted to that pioneering work of Rosemary. Also her work with women in refugee camps in Lebanon. Another direction she took is to look at textbooks for Palestinian kids in UNRWA schools in Lebanon and Jordan. And she kept badgering me about, why don't we publish more about this topic? I mean, I can't begin to sum up the enormous range of her work and her pioneering. And also she's got a new book coming out now by I.B. Torres Bloomsbury, a highly timely book about the international solidarity movement. And she started to write this book a few years ago. And she asked me, you know, do I know about people who became pro-Palestinians? She meant people who are not Palestinians who are becoming pro. How do people become pro-Palestinian? Because Rosemary herself was brought up in Britain, and she met her husband, Yusuf Sayegh, in the 50s, I think, in Iraq, when she went to teach at a college in Baghdad in the 50s, without being, at the time, being pro-Palestinian. She said she became a pro-Palestinian after meeting Yusuf Sayegh, who another giant figure in Palestinian scholarship and in the PLO at the time. And I think this issue of pondering how people become pro-Palestinian is such a relevant and highly timely issue with the international solidarity movements across the world. Since the 50s, there's a sea change in the way being pro-Palestinian, becoming pro-Palestinian. And we know the international solidarity movement in Britain, in the US, it's an enormous movement. It's got branches everywhere. It's got millions of, and I think we saw it during the protest. I mean, here in Britain, we have protests every single Saturday, national protests, local protests, and that international global solidarity movement grows by the day, and people becoming pro-Palestinian. This is actually her new book coming out in February by I.B. Torres. I'm looking forward to this book. I'm sorry Rosemary could not be with us tonight, but I will personally get in touch with her and congratulate her in the next few days. Congratulations to all winners. We in the Palestine Book Awards, we the judges say all those shortlisted are winners, not just the 5 categories. So I just want to repeat again, congratulations to all those shortlisted and all the winners of the Palestine Book Award this 2023. And I'll take it back now to Eugene and to Aisha. Thank you all.
Nur, thank you so much. And what a pleasure to see so many outstanding books honored with the Palestine Book Award 2023. It's been a very moving evening. It's been remarkable to come together with the authors, with the judges, with an audience that we can't see, but that we know shares so much the same feelings that have driven every one of our authors in the books that they have written, and all of their readers who will be enjoying these books in the coming year. I don't know if Aisha has anything more to say, but from my end, I would just like to wish all of our successful prize winners congratulations, all of our shortlisted authors, congratulations. Thanks to the judges for the hard work they put in shortlisting and then choosing between these amazing books. And thanks to Middle East Monitor for bringing us all together each year to celebrate the very finest in Palestinian letters, the Palestine Book Award. So my thanks to you all and good night.
Thank you all.
Thank you, Nur, and thank you, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you. Good night.